Hi, I'm Gina-R-Farrar, reinvention coach, creator and host of Feminine Roadmap podcast, and leader of this amazing global community of women. If you are approaching midlife or are already in the thick of it, welcome home. Please grab a cup of something wonderful and join me for some real talk, practical strategies, and a big dose of sisterhood. I am so glad you're here. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today we're going to be talking about stress, something we all experience and something we all wonder what to do with. So stress, according to my guest today, is about physical, emotional, and chemical, and how they all put wear and tear on our body, creating an environment that is more conducive to colds, viruses, and even chronic diseases. She says genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. My guest today is Katherine Kise. She's a certified health and wellness expert. She is the founder and principal of Sprout and Rosebud, and she's the author of a food sensitivity book for children called Katie Can't Eat Nuts. Katherine, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here and share some cool tips with your feminine roadmappers.
Well, you know, we talked about this before we hit play. Stress is just part of midlife, right? It's
right.
Part of all of life, but there's something unique about this season with the parents aging and the kids growing up, and a lot of marriages are changing. There's just so much. It's kind of like this very strange, intersection of all areas of our life.
Yes.
So I'm excited to learn from you. But before we jump into the information, which is my favorite part, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on this mission and message? Why stress? Why this kind of conversation?
Thank you. So for me, it's very personal. I grew up with food allergies. And then later in life, in my 20s, I developed additional sensitivities to very common foods that are considered healthy, like whole grains, whole wheat, things like that. At the time, I was going through digestive, neurological, dermatological issues. And as many of us do, especially in the Western philosophies, we go to individual doctors to treat individual issues. And it just wasn't really working for me, and something didn't seem right. And I happened upon a functional medicine doctor. And this was before functional medicine was even well known, or integrative medicine is another approach. It's very similar. And she was research heavy, and she was very educated in immunology. And again, it was complete happenstance that I found her. And she did more research after I'd been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis because of the neurological piece, and said that women in my age group who were of Western European descent presented symptoms of multiple sclerosis when it was a gluten allergy. And so I started understanding, or gluten sensitivity, depending on, again, what school of thought you subscribe to. And so I started understanding the impact of what food can have to activate certain genetics in your body. So again, genetics load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. So because of the lifestyle I was leading, which was heavy professional, I worked in a very male-dominated industry of finance. It was very dynamic, very high-paced, very high pressure. I was also in graduate school full-time, and I was training for long-distance running races. So I was putting a lot of stress on my body. And in that, it activated what I later found out was a genetic predisposition to a gluten allergy on one side of my family and a celiac gene on the other side. So in navigating that, I learned so much about a holistic approach to managing inflammation, to managing stress, to managing health, to actually thrive and not just feel better, but like really feel better. And because I had, as I mentioned, found her simply by chance, I realized this information needs to be more accessible to people. It needs to be easier to put into place. So it needs to be relatable and applicable. And I just said, you know what, I'm not finding a solution, so I'm going to create a solution. So I went to school. I became a certified health and wellness coach, while again, still in a full-time job. And I learned so much about just watching in the corporate world and also community groups and things like that, how all of this learning is so relevant to help us navigate career, motherhood, friendships, all of these things, because it does impact who we are and how we feel. And so that has led me, again, to create Sprout and Rosebud, the health and wellness coaching business. And then also write the book so that I can help plant seeds early on around what health means, so that as we grow up, we are being a little bit more educated and empowered no matter where we are.
That's an incredible story to really think about, because I think genetics is such a fascinating conversation anyway. You know, yes. the epigenetics, the light switches that go on and off, like how we live can keep the switch off and or turn it on depending on which direction is more positive.
Yes.
And I love that whole conversation. And isn't it interesting how every body is different in the way that it handles stress on one level, yet our bodies are all impacted by stress in some of the same ways.
Yes.
Right? Like some people can handle more, maybe longer,
yes.
but ultimately that stress is causing some kind of an impact.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your phrase, genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger, because that's obviously almost a life motto and experience for you.
Yes. For me, 100% it was. Yes. And I love how you were talking about the light switches and just epigenetics in general, because it is so fascinating. And I did see it firsthand through the changes I made, looking at kind of all those complexities that make us who we are, almost as though it were a wheel with puzzle pieces. So like professional, spiritual, relational, social, health and nutrition, movement, and, hydration, all these different things that come together, that you can really empower so much of your own healing by looking at yourself in that wheel of a way. And something that I really also enjoy that you just mentioned is that every body is so different, yet we are so similar. And one of the things I really, really want to stress to everyone is you can have a sense of healing in your own body by lifestyle changes. So you're not at the mercy of always taking prescriptions. It's just a mindset shift, and one that for me changed my life. And so for that reason, I definitely feel very passionately about it, as you can probably tell.
Well, the idea of, empowering healing. Let's talk a little bit about that. What does that look like? Because I think most people would automatically go to can and can't, do and don't, restriction, limitation. I'm going to hate my life.
Right. Yes. Yes. And it is this very much, I feel as though, especially in our culture where we are bombarded so much with marketing of like, you have to do this or else ... And this is the only solution, when really, no, like you said, every body is different. And you're going to have your own areas of passion and your own areas of stress. And so as you think about, again, in that wheel, what are the things that make you feel better? I'll give you some examples that for me were very interesting. So I have various clients. One of them will do sports car racing, like race car driving. That's his stress release. To me, not helpful. Like that would be so much more of a stress additive, but for him, he like zones out, and that is a meditative practice. And then of course we know who are artists, and that is just this, stress relief, and their heart sings, or maybe it's being creative in the kitchen. It could be cleaning, but you have to find that thing and do it regularly. Almost as you are mindful around drinking water, you are getting that, you're filling your joy jar. Basically, you have a jar, it needs to be filled, and you're worth filling it. I feel like a lot of times when we are managing so many roles, and particularly in middle age, where kids are shifting from being very dependent on maybe a mom or a caregiver, primary caregiver, to being more independent, or the marriage is shifting, or the career is shifting. We take on so much, and we are afraid to say no. And I think that by saying no, and that could simply be by saying no to stressing out and putting your energy into something you cannot control, that you put that energy into 20 minutes of just walking outside and putting your bare feet in the grass, you will feel a difference. So it's not a yes and no, or a do and don't. It's what works for you. And I would say something that is an easy way to get there is take a blank sheet of paper, write down the areas of life that you fulfill, whether it's spiritual, professional, nutrition, movement, all those, and rate them and say, like, how full do you feel in a positive way, like satisfied, fulfillment? And the ones that are lower, what can you do in those areas that might help you feel better? And what is something you can do today, in 7 days, in 30 days? And consistency is key. It doesn't have to be massive. But if you think about just 1 degree of being better every day in a week, that's a big difference. Mm-hmm. And then it sticks, and then you can do more. And then you have more energy. So then you can do more and you just feel better. So it is just finding what works for you and just making very small changes that you can be consistent about.
That's such a good thing to focus on, is just one thing. Mm-hmm. Even if you do it for 30 days, mm-hmm. I have a tendency to go one thing, okay, these 5, and then I don't do any of them because it doesn't work out, at the time, or I forget, so it's trusting that process of slowing down and choosing one thing. And I think when you talk about that circle of life, mm-hmm. right, that's what I call it, is the circle of life, where you look at your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, your physical, your psychological. If you mental can be one thing, psychological can be another, or they can be the same. And yes. Like you said, relationships, finance, mm-hmm. job.
Finance is a huge one that we don't think about.
We try not to, or we
fair. Yes. Yes. But it's interesting how much it can drain you too. Whereas if you can get just a little bit more of a handle on your finances, you can breathe a little bit more easily. And it frees up that to maybe take a yoga class or a painting class or buy more vegetables at the grocery store. It all feeds together.
I'll pitch. A couple of weeks back, I interviewed a guy who talks about happy money, Ken Honda. He's the Zen millionaire from Japan. And I think he talks about mindset. It's really how you think about money and being in relationship with money instead of having it.
I love that.
And I think it applies to what you're saying. Mm-hmm. We instead of having food or not having food, mm-hmm. instead of, doing the exercise or not doing the exercise, I think we could use that same kind of Zen money, happy money mindset and say, what kind of relationship do I want to have with exercise? What kind of relationship do I want to have with food? So that instead of his principle, and I want to apply it to what we're talking about, is he said, money's your master, your slave, or your best friend. It's your partner. And I think as you're talking, I'm like melding that into this conversation about health and stress. And I think it is how we look at things a lot of the time is a big piece of the pressure that we feel.
Yes.
It's a story that we have, a mindset that we have, not that the situation is going to change immediately, but when you and I mm-hmm. shift mm-hmm. our mental frame, that also helps with epigenetics, does it not? Yes. Like that way we view things.
Yes. And the neuroplasticity of the brain. There's also the gut-brain connection, where when there's a shift in one, there's a shift in the other. I don't know if you know, but 90% of your serotonin is created in your gut and 80% of your immune system is there. So it's a very important system, if you will, that has so much to do with the foods we crave, the sleep we get, the genetics. We are actually only, I've heard 2 numbers. I've heard 1% and I've heard 10% of human cells. The rest of us is like all these other microbiome that are supporting us in synthesis with who we are. And so it's very fascinating to say, like, okay, how do I make that shift to let go of the stress so that my overall health, my head works faster, my metabolism is faster, I heal faster, I sleep better, just by making, again, those like consistent little changes. What's your relationship with XYZ that reframes your mind, that gives you the energy to keep going?
Okay, I want to touch on that mind-gut connection. My daughter and I were just talking about this around sleep, and I was telling her, the serotonin and melatonin, the production center is actually your gut. So if you can get your gut in order, that will help your body. If your body is not a good producer naturally, there are things she could do. That's what we were just talking about like 3 days ago. I would like to talk about that because I do think that if we're going to talk about stress, you have to talk about the gut.
Yes.
And so you've obviously having a food sensitivity and allergy. That's, I mean,
it was the underlying. Yeah. It was, that was the underlying issue. I didn't realize that your gut could leak, for instance.
Well, you know what? It's what butterflies are, right? That's what a gut reaction is. That's what when you feel, do you feel it in your gut? We've used that more as a metaphysical kind of thing. And it really is a physical thing. It's not as woo-woo as it sounds, right? This is your body doing what it does. So let's talk about the gut and the biome, because I really think for people who might be not sensitive per se to food, but they have a lot of stress, you have all these factors, right? Nothing is this, like you said, everything is different. Let's talk about the gut and how impactful that is to your mission of dealing with stress.
Yeah. So I can speak from personal experience. For me, it was huge because it's a two-way street. So there's this mind-body connection where if I, for instance, if I start thinking a thought that makes me feel very stressed, my entire body will respond as though I am in that stressful situation right now. Okay, so now let's reverse it. So if I know that a stressful situation is coming up, can I relax my body in some capacity? Well, that's going to trigger my mind to then be calmer and get back into the flow. So the gut then also has a reaction to whatever is going on in your head and vice versa. So you have to manipulate one in order to manipulate the other. And I use manipulate in a positive way, but you got to work with what your physiology is. And so things that will add stress to your gut, which then adds stress to your overall ecosystem, are things like processed foods, which are harder to digest. They put a different toxic
load.
Yeah, but on your system. So things like chemicals, like what's the air that you're breathing? Do you work in a nail salon? Are you in a nail salon a lot? Like those sorts of things get into your system and they will affect your chemistry and they will affect the chemistry of your gut. Things like, did you take antibiotics a lot as a child? That also has a repercussion. For me, I had asthma and allergies as a child, and that proceeded throughout my life. In certain scenarios, I had to take steroids. Those also have an impact. So I've had to rebuild my gut health to then not only do you get more benefit around like feeling better just about your midsection, which is such a sensitive area for, at least for me, for women in general, I feel like it's we're a little sensitive, but you also are going to be getting more nutrients absorbed from your food. You'll have, for me, again, healing was faster because my overall ecosystem was actually running a lot better. And when you do have a leaky gut, which is basically like micro tears in your intestines where things that should stay intact leave, it creates a lot of stress and toxicity, again, in the body. So you have to heal that so that your body can heal all the other things going on. And then your brain, your body, your heart, everything starts functioning better because it's not diverting energy to try to clean up something that's out of whack.
That toxic load is so interesting because we really live in an industrial world, especially here in the Western world. And so even our food is impacted by decisions that maybe farmers make to, or maybe the government makes to increase the production.
That's right.
And things are being changed genetically.
Yes.
And that's a toxic load as well, because the stress is that our body doesn't recognize it. And I think like metals, heavy metals, people, in our generation and above who had a lot of metal put in their mouth for fillings, like it's really amazing the stress that our body has been under. And I think there is a psychological side of generational stress as well. We've just gone through the loss of my mother-in-law, which was an interesting study for me of that relationship. It was a unique relationship because we believe she had Asperger's, but of course nobody knew. So the way she parented caused stress. And that's something to think about as well. In terms of environment, if you will, allow me to expand it from, not just the chemicals, but there's there can be inadvertent toxicity in relationships, and that environment also impacts our stress, obviously. Do you have any thoughts about that kind of a balance, what it looks like to, you're looking inside and outside when you're talking about stress, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So I love that you talked about the environment exceeding just maybe what we think about as like air, land, water, because we are consuming all the time. So whether or not you know it, like your radio is on in the car, maybe, or you're listening to a podcast like this one, or you have the news on constantly because that's the culture we're in. So you are being bombarded with messages. And a lot of the messages that we hear are fear-based because that's what's going to get your attention. And if you think about it, we are in an attention economy. So social media has to get your attention. The news, they want to sell you on an idea. Just, there's this constant competition for where you're going to put your attention. And in doing that, you are now consuming things that might not be to your best benefit. They may not be serving you as optimally as they could. So I think if you think about it that way, not only what's going in your ears, what are you letting into your brain, stand a guard at the door, if you will. Is that the people who live with you? Is it how you speak to yourself? That's a really big one. We carry ourselves around constantly. So what messages are you saying in your head? Or if you want to go back to your mother-in-law example, we have those messages that have imprinted that you might not even realize subconsciously are on auto repeat, and they just go and go. So when you start feeling, let's go back to that gut feeling, a tension, for me, it's in my chest or my stomach, that I'm like, okay, something is off here. Like, I don't feel right. Pay attention to that. And then that's the first step. Just give yourself that 1 to 2 seconds of pause between trigger and reaction. And that pause is an eternity of making good choices, because you can tap in and you can say, oh my gosh, CNN, this is not doing it for me. I'm turning this off. Or I love my best friend, but when she talks about her son, she just goes on, and I don't have the emotional capacity to support that right now. How can I take care of myself so that I can take care of all of those depending on me? Or is it social media? Because a lot of social media is, we're not good enough. We need this product. This person is living, this Instagram filtered life. And here I am having a hard time with my friend whose son is having a hard time. What is this? And so you have to turn that off too. And so there is a lot that is more than just air, land, water, and what you put in your mouth that you are consuming that will determine your health.
I love the idea of consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Really thinking more big picture. What am I consuming?
Yes.
Who's speaking into my life, including me?
Yes.
Sometimes we're pretty toxic, and what am I listening to? And what am I looking at? That is so true. And it is so hard for us as women. It puts stress on us. I think if I can flip this, I'd like to flip this script, but I think for myself in some situations, not all, sometimes you feel obligated, or I feel obligated to show up for someone that I know is going to be a lot of work because we've been friends for a long time or whatever, right? Someone in your life, for whatever reason, maybe that's where they're at in their life. It's just a lot. And so it's hard to say no as a woman to being a friend, to being that shoulder, especially if that's your quote role. You know what I mean? So that's a stressor too, isn't it? Like feeling the pressure to do something.
Yes. The expectation.
That's really an interesting challenge, because the setting the boundary is stressful, but the goal is set the stressful boundary of no to get the space, to get the bandwidth, right? So it's almost like, okay, make that stressful decision now for the healthier outcome later.
Yes.
Food too. I suppose it applies to all of it.
Sure. Anything. Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm hearing kind of emerge as a theme for this conversation is being just intentional and mindful about how are you living and is it serving you? And to listen to your intuition. I feel as though, to go back to the expectations we put on ourselves and the voices in our heads, it is no, but, or give this, or keep going, or you can sleep later, or, but this person needs you. And it's like, yes, and you are one person and you need you. So how are you going to line up those puzzle pieces, that circle of life, so that you can do all the things you want to do? Because you're not a production facility. You are a human who is a being, not a human doing. So like, how do you be in this life that fulfills you? Because as the kids say, YOLO, you only live once. So let's make it really, really good.
You are not a production facility, but are we not living that way?
Yes, because productivity equals value so much of the time. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing.
Man,
it's so hard.
That's such a great phrase. You're not a production facility. And I love that you said yes and. One of the companies that I worked for, we actually had an exercise where you couldn't say but. It was like in a training. You had to say yes and that's expansive. It's abundant thinking as opposed to scarcity thinking.
Yes. I've gotten so much into abundance lately, and I love it because I feel as though for me, there's been such a shift recently, and you're nodding. For those of you who can't see, you're nodding. So I think that this is resonating with you. That we think if Susie has X, that means I don't get X. Or if she has more of X, that means I have less of X. Mm-hmm. And it's not. It's if Susie has more of X, that means I too can have more of X, because the universe, energy, it's all expansive. There's enough for all of us. There is more than enough space. There's goodness, there's wealth, there's health, like there's love, there are relationships. For me, that was a really big one, thinking like, oh gosh, well, now so-and-so has a boyfriend or so-and-so has a partner. That means I probably, it will never happen for me. No, that means I too can have that. Look at what that person was able to create. I can do that. And it's true for all of those circle of life segments. Just a matter of like shifting to believe it and let go of those self-limiting beliefs, which are really just, we're trying to protect ourselves. Fear is a protection, but you've made it this far. So think about what's possible.
Yeah. Like, what have you done instead of what haven't you done?
Yes.
Yeah. Like finding that ground of gratitude.
Yes.
Like really acknowledging ourselves for who we are and what we've done.
Yes.
And you talked about being in tune with body reaction. It's so fascinating. You were talking about it's your chest and your gut. Mm-hmm. My mom was in an abusive marriage when I was in my formative years. Okay. And later, when I started being triggered, it was like a gut punch. That's actually my torso was my trigger point. Yep. And so not everyone's experience is that dramatic, but it is good to figure. I didn't figure it out at first. It took time because the triggers started in my 20s. And I hadn't realized, and this is something maybe we can weave in, is we don't always realize that experiences we've had, we think we've dealt with it, or, we stuff it, or we just don't, as children, don't know where to put things.
Yes.
So they find a home somewhere in our memory, which is in our body, unfortunately, right? Which is where some of the chronic issues come from for people, I think.
Yes.
Is that emotional stress that maybe we're not fully aware of, or we thought it wasn't a big deal. And then our body is literally saying, like, you get in a similar situation and that stress hits you a certain way, like nothing else hits you that way. I think that is a good way to think about little t trauma. We all know about big T trauma, right? But little t trauma, the things that have impacted us emotionally, because you talked about emotional, chemical, and physical stress.
Yes.
The interesting thing is that emotional stress that is somewhere in our physical memory is causing physical stress.
Yes.
Every time we're triggered, is it not?
Yes. Yes. Because of the mind-body connection. Because really your mind has no idea that you are not in that abusive relationship right now. Your mind goes there because it remembers that's what's happening. And because of, again, that mind-body connection, your body is going to react as though that's where you are, even if you just happen to be sitting in a meeting and the person who is delivering the presentation reminds you of that person who you were dating at the time. It's just your brain goes there, and then you have to take the pause and be like, actually, I am totally safe right here, right now. There's a a mental health professional who I know very well, who has taught me about these different grounding exercises, so that when you do feel, oh my God, I can't breathe, or you feel that punch in your gut, to do these grounding through your senses, where you pay attention to 3 things you can hear, 3 things you can see, and 3 things you can feel. And what happens is in your brain, what's going on is what's called like the lizard brain. And you have to turn that off and then wake up the rational brain. And then once you get into that rational brain, it actually turns off that fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. And so then you can actually like think, which is very similar to just taking those 2 minutes between the 2 seconds between the stimulus and the response. It's that same thing. To get that 2 seconds, sometimes you just have to ground. Like I feel, the chair beneath me. I feel the shirt. I feel the fan is on and it's hitting my skin, things like that. And it really does snap you out of that very scary kind of reenactment of whatever the scenario is that you're thinking about.
Such a powerful and very easy to use tool.
Yes.
So it's a challenge to start that habit, but our brain is so plastic. You talked about neuroplasticity, that a consistent practice like that, your brain will begin to go, oh, what do you see? Oh, what do you hear? Right? You'll start, your brain will actually help you.
Yes. Yes. And what's so fascinating too is we are on one hand so delicate. Like if you think about it, a thought can take you down. Like it will take you are not even in the same room as your body right now. Yet we are so strong and resilient that we can repattern our brain. We can heal the gut that might be out of whack. Mm-hmm. There are all sorts of studies around positive imagery, not only for visualization for athletes, like, I think these are very well-known tales of athletes who picture the perfect free throw or whatever, and they just do it in their brain, like their body just starts to get it, muscle memory, without them even practicing it. Well, I've also read stories. There's a gentleman named Dr. Bernie Siegel who does a lot of cancer treatment. He was a child oncologist. He had a kid who had some sort of very serious cancer. And one of the things that Dr. Siegel implemented in his treatment was positive visualization, positive imagery. And so he would talk to the kid about it, and the kid would pretend that there was a superhero. He would imagine a superhero coming in and just getting rid of all the cancer cells. And the kid actually did get rid of his cancer cells. Now, granted, I'm sure there were other parts of his treatment, but that has been a very heavily studied, successful strategy, is your positive visualization, because there's so much about your brain that goes to your body and back.
It's one of those things that just feels like, come on, but it's true.
It's true.
Golfers do it.
Yes.
Swimmers do it. And
yes.
And it's really actually part of their training.
Mm-hmm.
Like, It's not like I do this sometimes. No, it's actually part of their process to become a more excellent athlete. And we use it negatively, don't we? We start to live the worst case scenario before anything happens sometimes. Yes. And we cause that mental stress on ourselves, whether it's a memory that, this triggers us to think.
Yes.
Or we put someone else in a box they never belonged in because they remind us of someone else. Yeah. Yes. I think a lot of marriages fall into that kind of pit, mm-hmm. where we're holding, people hold their spouses accountable for things they never did.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Some man somewhere, and then this guy's paying the price, or whatever. But it's interesting because you talked about intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so this feels fine line, because you have memories, right? You have a physical reaction to something. And how do you distinguish? Because I think intuition is very useful. I've taught my daughters, if your gut tells you, no, this doesn't feel right, mm-hmm. something's wrong, I don't feel safe, I've raised them, and hopefully takes practice, but I've told them, that's all your memories kind of congealing together, and your body's picking up on something that even it's like a subconscious filing system that's going through all of the details of the situation. I said, it's better to be wrong and safe than stay and be right and something happens, So I think there's this intuition is a partner where
Yes.
we need to really, sometimes we do need to remove ourselves. If our gut is saying something's not right, apologies can be made later.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, separate yourself, I think, is something that really comes into play when our gut is telling us something not triggered like you're reacting, but something deep inside of you is going, I don't know what it is, but I don't feel okay about this.
Yes. It's very important. It's very important.
Because it's stressful to doubt yourself too.
Yes.
It can put us in dangerous situations.
Yes.
Or healthy situations.
That's right. And I feel as though a lot of times women are more likely to do this than men, but we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And we're trying to be polite. And sometimes you have to say, like, this isn't working. Maybe I'm going to be that B word that none of us want to be called, but c'est la vie, here we are. And I'm going to have to take care of myself. And like you said, apologies can be made later. So with a graceful, assertive response, you just have to step away and not get in the elevator, not go down the alley, not go near that dog, like whatever it is.
Yes. And the stress that we feel in that moment is like, we have to evaluate our stress, don't we? It becomes like we become our own project. At least it has been that way for me.
Yes.
Like, why do I feel stress in this situation? Is it rational? Or am I just triggered? And so I think it's complex, but I love that you're talking about this holistic approach, this integrative, talking about functional and integrative medicine, because I think it's so important. I just went through this with caregiving for my mother-in-law. She'd been declining all year, and I'm talking to doctors and nurses and then, I can't answer that question because I only look at the elbow, and, I can't look at that because I only look at the whatever. I mean, elbow was not in it, but you get this feeling that they literally break it down to the degree of that's a thumb, not a pinky, and they can't answer that question. And that is a hard way to be healthy.
It is. Yes.
And you're talking about that idea of stepping back and knowing your whole self.
Yes.
And not focusing on the one stressor.
That's right.
What it sounds like.
That's right. Yes. Because it's all about balance. And interestingly enough, what's coming up after hearing that story that is very relevant is doctors actually don't get a lot of nutritional training as part of medical school. They get their specialization in whatever their area is, which is why we go to them. The thing is, that's not entirely working anymore. And it's thankfully there is a gentle shift. I'm sure we'll see it gradually over time. But what that means is each of us has to empower ourselves to be the quarterback of who we are, what we want our life to be, how we want to feel. And your intuition, your emotion, your experience is all information. And you as the quarterback look at the landscape and say, given what I know, the information I have at this time, in the state I'm in, this is the best decision I can make. And I will make the decision and let go, because that's all you can do. The rumination on what you think could happen takes vital energy away from your peace of mind, from your living in the present and enjoying. Maybe you're watching your child play or your grandkid play, and for those 3 minutes you zoned out, you missed it. So you have to just be able to say, okay, how can I be present? And it takes energy and it takes practice. That means you have to create that in other places. So again, that wheel is just so helpful for me, because it does say, like, okay, where am I very strong? And then what's kind of throwing me off kilter here? And how do I get myself back in balance?
Now, you shared one tool, which was that pause between trigger and reaction. You feel stress and you feel that like surge of, I'm going to react. You feel like all of a sudden what do you call it? The volume in your head has just gone to like 100, right? But you talked about focus on 3 things you can hear, 3 things you can see, and 3 things you can feel.
Yep.
Do you have any other really kind of practical things that you use to kind of help maybe maintain more stasis in this overstimulating world that we live in?
Yes. So yes, definitely listen to when you feel that constriction, and then it's okay to turn off the TV. It's really okay if you don't get the news. I would also say the consistency is key. So even if it's 5 to 10 minutes of exercise, just be consistent. Another easy one, relatively easy, is cram as many vegetables in as you can. So for instance, you're going to lunch, you want a burger, you're going to get a burger and fries, get the salad too. You don't have to give up the fries, get the salad, have the salad, and have all the other things too. But just force as many vegetables wherever and whenever you can. There are so many micronutrients in that, and food is information to your body. So it's what information do you want to say? And another, well, I'll give you two others. So again, the mental health one, the pausing, the grounding, being consistent with your exercise and your good habits, force in as many vegetables as you can, decrease your sugar. So that one is a huge one. The blood sugar impact has an incredible effect on our bodies. So just decrease your sugar. And things you can do are read labels and then just do the best you can to have less. That's it. And the other one is get as much quality sleep as possible. That's actually when your body is naturally detoxing, healing, dealing with inflammation, setting memories. Actually, that's a lot of when those memories will sink in, including short term. So if you learn something during the day and you get good sleep, it helps your memory form. Same with like languages. If you're learning a language, it helps it sink in when you get good sleep.
That's an incredible list. And it seems like, what do they call it? There's a gentleman that I follow. He's a great mindset coach, and he talks about common sense is not always common practice. And so you're not necessarily giving us 100% new information, but you're putting it in a package that says, you're not doing these just to do these, to be a good person or to, be successful. You're actually saying this is actually health care.
Yes. Yes. It is health care.
Yeah. Which is maybe a helpful shift. It
Yes.
feels less restrictive and more nurturing, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what relationship do you want to have with your health? And maybe start there. I think that's great. I think Mr. Honda was really onto something there, to just say, what relationship do you want to have? Okay. What can you do today?
And just do that one thing, right? Because it's amazing. Sometimes instead of changing your entire diet and being depressed about it,
don't do it.
You're going to fail, right? We're just not wired for that kind of, every once in a while you get that one person who could do something really dramatic, but the rest of us are like, yeah, that doesn't work. Last 10 days and then we quit.
Yes. And it helps you build momentum. So do that one thing, get success. You're winning. It builds a natural momentum to do the next thing. And before you knew it, you will have done like 3 to 4 changes, and you've done them consistently. And suddenly you're feeling rested. Amazing. Like, just, you get energy back. You can focus. You don't need that like 2:00 candy bar. It's these just little, super little things.
Or that caffeine addiction a lot of people have.
Oh, yes.
That gets into the whole adrenal system and the stress on that. That's a whole can.
Right?
Yes. Oh, well, we can't really go there. We're toward the end here. Now, I was going to ask you for 3 things to take away, but you just gave us like 6 really awesome things, which is fantastic. So let's review those.
Okay.
Go ahead and review them again, because right now is the point where, while you're listening, these are your anchor points. Pick one.
Yes.
Lift.
And put it on a Post-it and just have it in front of you. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I have Post-its. Okay. So our things first, try to create those 2 seconds between trigger and response. A helpful hint to do that is the grounding exercise. So what are 3 things that you hear, 3 things that you see, 3 things that you feel? Then also be consistent. So whatever it is that you're going to do, whether it's 20 minutes a day of exercise, forcing vegetables into your diet at every meal, just do it. Be consistent. Sugar. Pay attention to how you're getting any sugar, added sugar, things like fructose, hydrogenated corn oil, those things, and just cut back. And then lastly, get the sleep, as much high quality sleep as you can.
One of the things that helps me, I sleep like a log. After I had kids, I lost that for a few years. It's like the mom thing where you hear every sound. Yes. I was like, oh, this is sick. I keep waking up. I'm the kind of person who can sleep anywhere. I sleep. Yes. So, but I have this little yoga flow that I do. at night that I learned from Yoga with Adrienne. It was a sleep video. And it was fantastic because you can actually feel the flow in your body.
Okay.
Like you've opened it up. Whatever was constricted, now you feel like and you just sleep better because all of the stress that you've experienced through the day is locked in your muscles. You've got lactic acid, you've got tension, you've got all of this. And literally it's a very simple flow. I think it maybe takes me 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll double back on my downward dog or whatever. But for my body, starting with a quad stretch, as weird as that sounds, because I have tight hips. So it's really interesting. But there are things like that.
Yes.
Stretching that can really help your body begin to think, oh, we need to rest now. Like trigger the rest with what you used to do at bedtime.
Yes. Those rituals. Because it turns your brain on that it's cued like, oh, now it's bedtime.
Another thing too is, I don't know if you do this, but I love to listen to Headspace.
Okay.
They have what they call sleep casts.
Ooh.
And they're like sound and a little bit of story, and they always do a wind down. And sometimes I don't even make it past the wind down, or I fall asleep in the middle of the wind down. But there are tools that can help de-stress at bedtime.
And they're free. That's also a thing. Is there are free accessible tools, which is like amazing.
And once you get used to them, your brain actually goes, oh, we're supposed to sleep now.
Yes.
I hear this voice and that's sleep.
I love it.
Right?
Yes.
It's like the morning smelling coffee wakes you up. This is the opposite. Yeah. So how can people reach you, Katherine?
Oh, thank you. So my website is katherinekise.com. Which I believe you'll put in the show notes so people know how to spell it because it's a little tricky. I would also say Instagram is a great way. I offer like little videos and tips and things that are similar to things that we talked about today. And so that's just at Katherine Kise. Facebook too is at Katherine-Kise. And that's it. I think those are the main ways. Yeah. And
you also have, if you have a child or a grandchild that has a food allergy, where can you find your book, Katie Can't Eat Nuts?
Yes, Katie Can't Eat Nuts is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and then local bookstores as well. So if it's not on the shelves, you can always ask for it and they will order it for you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Katherine, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today and bringing so much practical information to something that impacts all of our lives. Your passion, your enthusiasm, your depth of knowledge is such a gift. And I'm so grateful that you said yes.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. This is like better than a cup of coffee. I'm jazzed for the rest of my day. So thank you so, so much.
I feel the same way. Isn't that funny? It's like, woo, the extra for me is like, yes, this is
I love it.
And I'm only an hour in. All right. Today, friends, I've been speaking with Katherine Kise. She's a certified health coach and wellness expert. She's the founder and principal of Sprout and Rosebud. She's the author of Katie Can't Eat Nuts. If you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 236, I will have hyperlinks to all things Katherine so that you can find her easily. And how to spell her name is Katherine, Katherine. Last name Kis as in Sam E, in case you're wondering. Friends, this is one of those conversations that needs to continue in our life. Because as life changes, as we come into new seasons of life, as one phase ends and another begins, sometimes it's an easy transition, sometimes it's a stressful transition, but stress is something we all live with. And there are things we can do to manage it and to find that balance. So pick one of these things that Katherine has shared today. Partner with a friend to encourage each other, even. Like, instead of a book club, have a stress balance club. Find a way to build a community of people that are becoming more mindful and more aware and bringing that healing to our mind, body, and spirit. Because really, we're not one or the other, we're all of it. The better we get a handle on it, the better quality of our relationships, our lives, our health, and everything else. So thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to having more empowering conversations. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.